Addicts, Hornets, we're here. First game of the championship for Charlton in 5 years. Woo! Hi there. Welcome into the first live preview show from the Volley from the Volley podcast. My name is Callum and I will be your host. To those of you listening, I'll edit out previous bits. You don't have to hear the weird noises I've just made. But for those of you that are joining, thank you for taking the time. There's a comment section there. Feel free to chuck in questions. If you've got anything you want to talk about, put it out there. On the pre-match previews, I'm going to just probably keep it to me and a guest. On the post-match ones, we'll try and get you guys involved if people want to come on. Any sort of inquiries about that sort of stuff from the valleyfloydpod@gmail.com. Send me over your email address. I'll send you over a link, and we'll figure out how we can get you guys on to have a conversation after the game on Saturday. We'll probably go live. I'm thinking maybe after Charlton live. I don't want to step on Louis' toes. Sort of around lunchtime. But we'll figure that out. I'll put a tweet out later. All right. So unfortunately, normally I'm going to do these on Wednesday at 7:00. Unfortunately, the Community Trust had their stream on this evening, which was really, really interesting. So when I say unfortunately, I just mean unfortunately for me and for those of us that have to start slightly later on a work night. We'll only be here for like half an hour, 40 minutes, depending on if people have anything that they want to check in the comment section or if they want to ask anything. But because it's a little bit later, I didn't want to have Cameron, who's from the podcast Voices of the Vic. I didn't want him to be on late. It didn't feel fair to him on a work night. So we did a bit of a pre-record. So it's about 20 minutes where I'll be around. You can drop comments or respond to them. But basically, it'll be a bit of a pre-record of the conversation I had with him, which was really interesting. Tells a lot about Watford, Nathan Jones and his opinion on him, which, as you can imagine, is not particularly positive. And then where Watford are, the injuries that they currently have, and what they're sort of looking at heading into the season. For me, I really wanted to start by just having a look at my sort of predicted 11 for the game. I forgot to turn the ticker on, so I just done that for those of you that are watching. But basically, I'll do my sort of predicted started 11 for the game, and maybe I'll do a couple of subs. A bit difficult because Nathan doesn't give us any of the injury information, but I'll try my best. We'll have a quick chat about Gassan and Terry Taylor's a little bit of information that's come out about them and potentially their futures, and then we'll have a watch of the conversation I had with Cameron, and then at the end we'll have a bit of a recap and yeah, have a real look ahead to Saturday. All right, so I'm going to put my predicted 11 for Saturday up on the screen. You will see it. It should be there. There we go. So I've gone with Thomas Kaminski. I'm going to start reading it right. It goes off the bottom of the page, aren't I? There we go. Here we go. So I've got Kaminski, Edwards, Bell, Jones, Ramsey, Apter, Coventry, Doherty, Kerry, Tyrese Campbell, and Charlie Kelman. I think I'm only one off of what Richard Corley had in his article from yesterday, which is quite interesting. I think most of the positions sort of pick themselves, judged on sort of preseason minutes. What's sort of happening? Evening, Sam. Sam's in the chat. Sam from Charlton Live. Great guy. That's on at 7:00 tomorrow. Make sure you watch that. I'm not sure when the Chronicles one is live actually, but I assume they're going to do something on the pre-games. Watch that as well. It's a great community that we have supporting the wonderful club. But the starting 11 is. It sort of mostly picks itself. I think you've probably got questions at left centre back. It's a choice between Bell and Gillespie. Personally, I went with Bell. I think Bell's been really, really good during pre-season. I think there are some questions about maybe his positioning on the back post, which still gives me PTSD from Sean Clare. But So that's the only position that I think really there's much debate over. If Miles is fit, maybe up front. I think other than that, Kaminsky will be the number one throughout the season. Edwards, we don't really have anyone else to put on at left back. Jones, obvious. Ramsey, obvious. Apter, obvious. Coventry, obvious. Doherty at some point will have a battle with Joe Rankin Costello, I'm pretty sure. But with Costello sort of coming out of that Ipswich game and then not playing on Saturday, I'm hesitant to sort of think that he'd be coming straight into a championship game after 2 weeks off. And then you've got, Tyrese Campbell, I think Nathan Jones absolutely loves and will play as often as humanly possible. And Charlie Kelman, obviously coming in for what could end up being a club record if reports to be believed. If anyone's got any disagreements, chuck it in the feel free to chuck it in the comments if you want. But that's sort of what I'm thinking will look like. I think tactically it's going to end up being that same sort of 3-5-2 that we sort of play. That we sort of play most of last season. Apter will do that very sort of crazy right wing, not really coming back to play right wing back sort of role. Sort of doing the Thierry Small role, I would imagine. And that's interesting because it leaves Ramsey sort of facing overloads, and in League One, it was like Ramsey was playing on autopilot, dealing with those. I think in the Championship, that space is probably going to be quite well exploited. We'll listen to the conversation with Cameron where he sort of talks about Watford's wingers and where they are and what's going on, but they do have some pace, and that would concern me. But so Sam's asking me, do I know when the squad numbers will be released? I don't actually. I would make the assumption it would be tomorrow. And that's going to be really illustrative because if anybody's not in that starting 11, is not in that squad number release list, you make the assumption that they'll be leaving. That's a really good segue. Cheers, Sam. For discussions about two players who I think it's pretty obvious we want to leave the football club, and that's Ghassan Ahadme and Terry Taylor. Ghassan, what is there to say? I'm not as harsh on him, I think, as a lot of people are, and the real issue is I think the fee that's been quoted is wrong. I don't think it was $1 million. I don't think it's any close to $1 million, judging by sources that are normally quite accurate. It looks like it was probably closer to $750,000, which is still crazy money to spend for one goal in 19 league games. He clearly had some personal issues later on in the season, which is why he wasn't even in squads. I don't think that was necessarily because of the way he was playing, although by the time you get to the playoffs, you can't, or late in the season, you can't reintegrate him. So, it's a difficult one for him, but he's on a large wage. At least at League One level, you'd imagine there'll be bonuses in that contract, which will increase that weekly cost. And it's quite clear that we spent a lot of money and we probably want to get the wages off the wage bill. Bolton Wanderers supposedly, now this is coming from Alan Nixon, who is one of the least reliable journalists in football, so please take this with a massive pinch of salt. I think actually he's been better this year, though, with some of his transfer stories in football League World, I think it is. We've had a couple of exclusives. But he said Bolton are coming back in for Ghassan. Previously, it seemed to fall apart because personal terms, it sounds like we're willing to take a massive fee reduction on what we paid for Ghassan originally. Now, the question is does he want to stay at his wages, which were sort of paid as a quote unquote top level League One player, which I still can't believe we actually did. But we did. And there's going to be questions over whether we're going to have to fund part of those wages or is he going to take a pay cut? I make the assumption that there'll be some sort of agreement. Bolton do have some money, although funnily enough they did. So they did sign Mason Burstow on loan because they couldn't find somebody else. I think they're looking at a striker at Celtic as well. Is it Joe Kenny? And so I think that they're interested in him, but supposedly he's a couple $100,000 more in a transfer fee, and they don't want to pay it. And anyway, it's not a Bolton podcast. But my hope is that Ghassan sort of gets a move. I think it'd be good for him. It'd be good for the club, and I think it's important that we sort of move on from that chapter. Terry Taylor is an interesting one, mainly because the reason he's not playing is because Nathan Jones doesn't like him particularly as a footballer, and I think that's pretty obvious. It doesn't mean he doesn't have qualities. I think he's a good passer of the ball. He's an excellent set piece taker. But physically in the middle, I think he's pretty easy to overrun at times. And in the Championship, I think that's going to be a real issue. Do we have the sort of necessary quality, is there the necessary sort of physicality to match the sort of quality on the ball? I'm not sure that's true. I think that League One's probably about his level. He's still 23, 24, so he's still got some time to develop. I'm just not sure that I think he's going into the last 2 years of his contract now will be the time to sell him to get some money back. I know Northampton had some interest. There've been some reports today there's interest from Luton. Although, and I think that would sort of make sense, but if you're Luton, can he make the step up? Are you just signing him to be a squad player in League One? It's a bit of a strange saga. I ultimately think that going back to Northampton would probably make the most sense for Terry. But we'll see as the week goes on. Okay. I just wanted to kind of go through those sort of 2 bits of sort of outgoings before we really sort of look at this Watford game in depth. I want to kind of look at the Excel because I'm quite interested in how and whether sort of people disagreed with me. That was kind of going to be the most people sort of predicted squad. I think would look something like that. It wouldn't shock me if Gillespie, by the way, is chosen. I know that that some of the arguments for those that are predicting Gillespie to start is the fact he started against Ipswich, which actually was a more difficult opposition than the ones that Bella started against, which have mostly been lower league. But I think when you're playing a player with your sort of top choice, with your top choice centre backs in the last couple of preseason games, that probably means that that's the player that he's leaning towards, and that wouldn't surprise me as a player that he signed for Luton, as a player that Nathan clearly likes, and there should be plenty of games to go around for everybody. Okay. Now, I don't know a huge amount about Watford. I'm not sure that many of us do, beyond the fact that they have slightly crazy owners that fire managers all the time. And actually, they've probably slightly underperformed over the last couple of seasons, being a parachute payments club. And their squad, when you look at it, actually isn't quite what you think a parachute payment club should have. Now, I know the Pozzos and issues with what's been spent on Udinese, what's been spent on what's going into the owner's pockets. It's a difficult one. I think they're probably a pretty good argument against parachute payments at times, Watford, but I don't know a huge amount about them. Luckily, for the next sort of 15 minutes or so, I'm going to show a video of somebody who knows a lot about the Hornets, and so I'm just going to play you my pre-recorded conversation that I had with Cameron from Voices of the Vic. As I say, got any comments, questions, anything, stick them in the comments. I'll be around just while the video plays. All right, welcome back. I'm here with Cameron Smart from the Voices of the Vic podcast. How you doing this evening, Cameron?
Yes, I'm very good, mate. I'm looking forward to having Championship football back. It feels very strange that we've already seen the first weekend of EFL fixtures, but we're still waiting for ours to come around. I feel like that doesn't normally happen, but yeah, I'm really looking forward to being back and hopefully beating you guys on Saturday. But yeah, how are you doing, Callum?
I'm doing well. I feel a bit like a kid on the week before Christmas.
So do I.
Just want to get going. This I'm saying this now before we get tonked 3-0 with and have one shot on target, right?
I wouldn't count on it.
Well, it's the first game. Obviously a very exciting one. And a really interesting matchup, I think. What I've sort of said about Watford whenever I've been asked is that you are the ultimate wildcard team. I think you're not too dissimilar from a side like West Brom, where you could quite easily finish 7th and it wouldn't shock me. But if you finish 19th, it also wouldn't shock me. And if you got through 7 managers, it wouldn't shock me. Or if Palazzo becomes the greatest manager ever and you get promoted and then you sack him when you get to the Premier League, it wouldn't sack me. What are you sort of seeing from your transfer business so far? And how are you guys looking going into the season?
It's been a lot more positive than we expected. Obviously, we ended last season on the ultimate low of sacking Tom Cleverley, which I'm not sure how clued up you are on that, but not many of us are pleased about that. to say the least. But yeah, we have sort of every year just a really lackluster transfer window, and this year, it seems like they've sort of breathed a bit of life into Watford, and they're very much taking punts on a lot of unproven players. I think that's where we sort of differ to Charlton business wise. You guys seem to have signed a lot of steady Championship players, which looks like exactly what you need to do in sort of your position. But we've gone for a lot of we're taking a big gamble on a lot of the players we signed. There's so many that haven't played in English football, lots of young players, and not so much experience being brought in either. So you're bang on. It could go either way with us, really. We could really click, and we could have we could be one of the most free scoring teams this season because of some of the players we brought in. But it could completely go the other way, where we don't have the nerve, we don't have the bottle to really hold on, and we don't have the know-how to sort of make ourselves a consistent Championship team. So yeah, you're right. It's very interesting, and not one Watford fan can tell you how we're going to do this season. So yeah, myself personally, I'm predicting sort of upper mid-table, maybe pushing for the playoffs, but I wouldn't be shocked if we're 21st. So it could really go either way.
I respect you not choosing 22nd there.
I don't want to mention the bottom three this year. I predicted it last year, and I couldn't have been much further off. So
I think it'd be really interesting just to get kind of you mentioned Tom Cleverley just before maybe get into a little bit of your summer business. The thing that I've heard is that, and kind of what I've seen when I did some research for the pod, is that your form sort of fell off a cliff after Christmas. You did the opposite of what we did. And that seems to be the thing that ultimately has cost Cleverley his job. So are you saying that your fan base thinks we should have actually given him more time? Well, the owners, and I know they're sort of slightly crazy. I've been to Udinese, by the way; it's amazing, but they are slightly crazy. Do you think that maybe actually they've been quite smart here, and they thought, the form fell off a cliff. We're not going to take that risk with three sides coming up from League One, who probably aren't going to be, hopefully, in our case, too close to the relegation zone.
Yeah, it's again, it's tough to say because I think our form falling off a cliff was their own doing more than it was Tom Cleverley's fault. We sort of went into that season with only two wingers. One of them had never played senior football, and the other, had never even played at Championship level, Kwadwo Bar. And he ended up being a real live wire. He sort of carried the first half of our season, and then he got injured, as we probably expected that he might. And he was out for a long time, and we had no one to come in for him. So it was Musa Sissoko on the right wing for half a season. Musa Sissoko isn't even very good in his actual position anymore. So to see him on the right wing, it was painful. And I think that's most of what killed us. We just didn't have any depth, and we didn't do anything about it in January. Yeah, we brought in some good players. We brought in a very good goalkeeper, Egil Selvik. A really good centre-back that you'd like called James Abankwa.
We'll get there.
Charlton. And yeah, we did sign a couple of players in January, but it didn't really feel like we addressed what we needed to address. And we were left really, really light on the wings. And yeah, it stopped us from really doing anything meaningful in attack. So I put it more down to, the lack of backing. Maybe you could fault Cleverley for some things, of course, but it's not entirely his fault, no.
I think looking at your summer business, I think what's very interesting is, one, the manager you've chosen is an interesting choice for the division, but again, the onus is not a surprise. If there was one club that was going to do it, it would be Watford or it would be Hull. But I think what's quite interesting, and maybe I'm wrong here, but from what I can see, you actually seem to have dealt a lot less with your sister club, Udinese, this summer. I know the one player you did sign from there is a Charlton favourite, a Charlton legend. I'm going to have some shirts hanging up behind me over the next few streams. I bet you a James Abankwah shirt is going to be pride and centre of it for the game and a half he played at right back in what may be one of the worst performances I've ever seen.
Wow.
And again, we didn't actually lose, by the way.
Well, he debuted for us at right back, and we all thought, really? And then he had the game of his life. So I don't know what you guys did with him.
I think we just benched him. But if Michael Appleton's benching you, it's a long way back. So he's really floated instead of sunk to end up.
Yeah, he was one that when he got brought in, we were all like, really? We thought, is this how you're backing the manager? A guy that failed at Charlton a year ago, in the league below us, and he didn't pull up any trees. So we all thought, oh, it's typical Gino Pozzo. He's taking the cheap option. He's saying, look, I've brought in a player. What more do you want? But no, that one ended up working out nicely. And yeah, with Udinese, the whole situation's a bit up in the air at the moment, because at the start of the summer, it looked like they'd actually been sold. And for a few months, that sort of carried on. The talk was they've been sold. But it's all gone a little bit quiet with that. We've done some shady business, as we normally do. They've signed a striker for €5 million. They've loaned him to us, and we've got an obligation to buy, which is probably next to nothing. So we're just trying to get every penny out of Udinese at the moment, which is great for us. I am going to miss parts of this if we do sell them. We're not going to be the most controversial team in the Championship anymore, which is going to be. It's going to be quite sad. But yeah, the Udinese link is definitely diminishing a bit, and it's meant they've had to get a little bit more creative in the market. We've signed players sort of from the French second tier, and we signed a Bayern Munich kid, and we've even signed a few sort of homegrown EFL players, which we never ever do. So there's a clear change in approach this year.
I mean, it's one of those, isn't it? I mean, we were talking about it earlier. It really could go either way. It's either going to be an absolute masterstroke or a complete disaster. And I think that it's unlikely to end in mid-table mediocrity. I think, looking at the business you've done. I mean, I mentioned him earlier in the pod, and he's a player that I really like. Is quite a bar on the right wing. I know that you've got quite a lot of pace now on the wings, which is quite exciting. I know that you're also missing a couple of players. You've got a couple of injuries. You're able to sort of tell us who's likely to not be in the team at the Valley on Saturday.
Yeah, so Kwadwo Bar could potentially be one of those. He sort of came back late for pre-season because of the injury that I mentioned earlier. He has got a few minutes under his belt, but I don't know if he's going to be starting, to be honest. Georgie Chakvetadze, probably regarded as our best player last season by a lot of people. I'm one of them. I think he's fantastic, and yeah, he hasn't featured at all in pre-season. Not because he's leaving or anything, but because he's been recovering from an injury, and they reckon that he sort of got back to full training maybe a week or two ago. Looks unlikely that he'll start, and then there's the new signings. Nestoria and Kunda is one of them, and there is a lot of hype about him, and it seems justified because he looks like a great player. But it might be just a little bit too soon for him. And then there's the left back we've brought in as well. We had him last season, Caleb Wiley, on loan from Chelsea. He's a really solid left back, and yeah, I just think it's going to be too soon for him. So it's a good time to play Watford, I think. We're not quite up to speed yet, I feel. We're definitely going to get a lot better. So, yeah, I think probably first game of the season, right time to play us. And in contrast, I look at Charlton, and I feel like you guys are sort of ready to hit the ground running with a lot of the players you sign. I mentioned that, you know, it's all sort of EFL experience. You know, they've all had full pre-seasons. I feel like you guys are really going to be up for it, and you're going to hit the ground running. So I am very, very nervous for Saturday.
I mean, there's going to be 22,000. I think that's probably more than that. We're not going to be a million miles off a sellout. It doesn't sound like for Saturday as well. Which I know you guys in the away end get the view of the massive stands. Which can be quite quite intimidating when it's full. I would be absolutely remiss to not talk about the very obvious connections between Charlton and Watford's favourite club from down the road, Luton Town. I was about to make a joke about Arsenal's training ground being about 5 miles from yours, but no, Luton. I'm sure, and I mean to ask this to every fan who kind of comes on this podcast. I'm sure almost everybody has a memory of raging at Nathan Jones doing something. But the Luton connection, I think it's really, really interesting. It was against you, wasn't it, where he climbed into the stands? I think once when they beat. Did they draw? Was it last minute winner? Something like that. He climbed in and sort of gave the Luton fans the big one.
I'm not sure. We played Nathan Jones's Luton twice in lockdown, I believe. Yeah. And then did we get to play them again? I know we battered them 4-0 at our place. And that one was Nathan Jones. And then I think by the time the return fixture came around, he'd actually gone off to Southampton. So,
I think what it was, I think he may have made a comment. I think he made a comment or something about the
he definitely made a lot of comments. Oh, yeah.
It was something like that, wasn't it? Yeah, and that seems to rile a lot of people up. I'm confusing you with Swansea. That's what I'm doing. I don't quite know I'm doing that. It was Swansea climbed into the Cardiff boy.
I do remember that. Yeah. He boils my blood even when Watford aren't involved, to be honest.
He's one of those guys, yeah.
You got a lot of stick throughout your playoff run, and I was one of them giving him stick because
probably fully deserved.
Yeah.
It was a little ridiculous.
If you weren't supporting Charlton, you'd probably think, oh, what an idiot. But
at times, sometimes I watch Charlton and I see him on the sideline losing his mind, and I tell you, like, if you sit behind him, I sat behind him for a Virtue Trophy game against Leyton Orient. He was absolutely losing his mind. It's one of the funniest things I've seen. Then it all kind of got a bit toxic with a fan behind him. But before that, honestly, it's some of the funniest. You can just watch him and watch your manager on the sideline, and that's enough entertainment. So if we end up with a really crappy 0-0 draw where neither of us wants to go for it, at least we'll have entertainment on the.
You know what? I think it's a great thing our manager can't speak English, because if he could, there'd probably be a lot of drama on the sidelines on Saturday.
It's a weird one because it's not, right. We're not. Obviously, you guys are out in Hertfordshire.
Yeah,
we're not rivals, and I think we get the same thing with QPR sometimes. It's a derby or a local. It's like no, it's not. Like, I have no real feelings towards. If it's Millwall, yeah. Crystal Palace, yeah. A little bit or whatever with West Ham every once in a while because we shared a ground with them and all the rest of it. But like. No, there is no rivalry. There is no derby, and the police saying that games have to kick off at 12:30 with that sort of stuff drives me mad. But it feels a little bit because of the Luton connection, right? You look at players like Amari Bell, you look at players like Reece Burke, you look at Thomas Kaminski. Like these. Maybe less so this year. I mean, there's Luke Berry on the sideline, which has played you guys a number of times. But he's probably going to be on the bench, I'd imagine, on Saturday. But other than that they're sort of newer Luton players who sort of maybe played you once or twice rather than been there a long time. Whereas if Danny Hilton was rocking up as he was last season, that might have been a bit of a different. I love Danny Hilton, though. We'll hear no slander.
We had a long spell of not playing Luton, obviously, because we were in the Premier League and they were sort of down in the depths somewhere. I don't even know what league they were in. It's not a league that I've heard of, but and now we're sort of building up that gap again, which is nice. But yeah, we went a while without playing them. So the players that you've signed, they're sort of in my lifetime. They're probably the ones that have played against Watford the most. So Amari Bell is one I look at. He seems to be there sort of whenever we play Luton. They're all, I hate to say it, but they are all sort of solid Championship players that you've signed there. Kaminsky, Burke, Bell, they'll all do a job for you at this level. And Nathan Jones, again, I hate the bloke, but he has a good record at this level. You can't deny that. So yeah, I'm not ruling out there being a bit of hostility towards particularly Nathan Jones from the away end, and I just hope it doesn't come back to bite us, really.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one guy I could imagine walking up to the away end and giving you sort of a fist up or whatever.
Yeah, I struggle to think if we've actually played against him since he left Luton, because obviously he was at Southampton and then he dropped straight down to League One with you guys. So I think this is our first meeting with him since we beat them 4-0. So
he doesn't do his press conference till tomorrow, but I'd be interested to see if he mentions that connection. I'd actually be surprised if he did. I don't think that it's quite interesting. He actually doesn't mention games at Luton as much as you think that he would, despite the fact that he signs lots of players for Luton and talks about, he had a great time there and everything. He actually kind of, I think, moves to the club and then tries to sort of become part of it. So he a very funny quote. He was asked what games you're looking forward to. We're all sat here as Charlton fans, haven't beaten Millwall in, was it 28 years or something? We've only played them like 12 times in that thing. But it sounds like a worse stat because we spent 8 years in the Prem and they were again down in League One and in the Championship, failing to get into the playoffs on the last day. But it's one of those things where it's like he literally pointed at it and he went, "I'm excited about going back to my country, so going back to Wales, fair enough." And he was like, "Watford at home," and he was like, "Because it's the opening day." And I thought, "Oh God, thank God you didn't mention anything about Luton. Thank you, jeez, we don't need that." And then because we're all going to be amped up enough, and then he went, "And Millwall," and I was like, "Oh no!" So no Charlton fan ever looks forward to Millwall. No. And I, obviously Alfie Doughty is, went from Luton came from Rhodes to Luton to Millwall, and so that's going to be, it's going to get a lovely reception in September. I'm sure. Just before we go, I really hate predictions, but I'm going to do it anyway because why not? So, do you have a prediction for Saturday? Personally, I think I'm going to go with the most Nathan Jones scoreline of all time. Good old-fashioned 1-0 goal scored in like the 63rd minute.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule that out. Again, I know probably as much as you about how Watford are going to look this season. It's so tough to tell at the moment, but I think this is not my brain speaking, this is my heart speaking. I feel like we've got an opening day win in us. We normally win on the opening day, and I'm going to go with 3-1 to us.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time on a Wednesday evening. And after Saturday and excluding the game, I think we play again. Is it March we come to Vicarage Road?
I think that's right, yeah.
I'm sure Nathan's going to get a wonderful reception.
Yeah, he'll be our manager by then.
I wouldn't put it past him. Actually, no. To be fair, I think that there are certain things there's certain Rubicons he will not cross. Yeah. But yeah, other than those two games, all the best for the rest of the season.
Likewise.
See you on Saturday.
Yeah, see you then.
Cheers, Cam.
Cheers.
All right, that was 1 second. I'm in the wrong scene. Oh. Why is this not letting me free? 1 second. There we go. Sorry about that. I'm still learning StreamYard. So that was Cameron from Voices of the Vic. Really enjoyed chatting to him. Apologies, I laughed quite a lot there. We were just having a really good conversation. But I've got a quick comment that's come in. This is from Samuel. I'm pretty sure I've seen on Twitter /X, whatever you want to call it. Which new players do you think are going to start this season? If we're just talking about Saturday, you can see here I've got Kaminsky, I think Bell, Apter, Carey, and Kelman are probably the ones on Saturday that I probably will start. I think that what's going to make that question so difficult to answer? I think Nathan Jones will rotate that front line quite often. He's got so many options up front that, you know, there are going to be games where you want a Miles Lebo up front. There'll be games when you want a Tanto Oluwafe up front, right? And that's going to be the question. And then it's just a question of when Reece Burke is fit for the 7 games, whatever it's going to be all season that he's fit. You know, will he slot straight in? I don't think so. I think Kane Ramsey's probably got that on lockdown. But, you know, Harvey Nibbs probably comes in to replace Kerry, but that's, you know, so it's a new player for a new player. And then it's just a question of, as I said earlier in the pod, does Joe Rankin Costello start games over Doherty? I think if we're talking about quality, he probably does, especially quality on the ball. But Doc is club captain, right? So it's a difficult one. When you look at it that way, are you going to drop your club captain? I don't know. I know that there are a lot of people who actually think that Lloyd Jones should be club captain anyway. Which you're not going to take it off a player that's just led the team to promotion. It'd be a bit silly. But, you know, if Doc ends up on the bench quite often, it almost certainly would go to Lloyd. So it's an interesting sort of conundrum you've got in that sort of midfield area. I think really only Coventry is secure in that. So in terms of the number of new players, I think it could be anywhere from 5 to 7, depending on the squad. I think that Kaminski will play every championship game. I think Bell will play quite often. I think Apter will play almost every game. And then I think probably one of Nibbs or Kerry will play most games. And then Kelman, pretty obviously, with the price that he cost. And then I imagine Nibbs will, once he's fully fit. I have a question, you know, feel free to put it in the chat. I think someone else has just commented. Yeah, so that's Sam's response to your comment, Samuel. But I think that it's an interesting question. I think, do you guys think, and this is a criticism that's been made of our business heading into this Watford game, do you think that we've overpaid for certain players here? You know, if you look at Tanto Oluwafe, considering they replaced him with Malik Mothersley for £600,000 less, we were sort of interested in Mothersley, whether that was a smokescreen or not, who knows? But for people trying to get the price up, no one's really sure. But if we were interested, surely you would have thought that we would have spent that 600,000 on. Save that 600,000. It's quite an interesting thing, unless we think that Oluwafe is more ready. I've always been quite intrigued by that idea. Do you guys think that we've overpaid for certain players? I think probably the obvious one is, you know, have we overpaid for Coleman? I'd argue probably not. Strikers are expensive. Have we overpaid for Oluwafe? Probably slightly. But I see why they've done that. Rankin Costello, I don't think they've overpaid for 750. I think is actually probably going to be quite cheap if he can stay fit. I think paying any sort of fee for Burke, considering his injury record, is probably overpaying. But the quality is there. Bell was free. I mean, Kaminski was under $1 million, so I don't think you can overpay to have a starting level keeper. But I'd be interested to see what other people think. As I say, on Sunday when we come back for the post match, you guys are welcome to hop on. Just send me an email at fromthevalleyfloydpod@gmail.com, and I will try and get you guys on. There will be a website coming where you'll be able to sort of do that without having to send an email, but just for these couple of weeks whilst we kind of get that all set up. I think heading into the game, and before I sort of reflect on what's been a really difficult sort of 10 days, I think, for the football club, in terms of some of the losses that we've suffered, not on the playing end, obviously, but in terms of off the pitch, I think that I look at this game, and I know Cameron said it's a good time to play Watford, and it may be a good time to play Watford. You know, new manager, the fact he doesn't speak English, I think, is really interesting. Again, I'd argue only the Pozzos could hire someone like that. But I look at Watford, and I think are they going to be fully up to speed? They've got injuries. I got Sam's response to my previous question. But I think that I think you're probably right, Sam. To be fair, that's probably where I sort of stand. But it's a good time to play them. But it's probably one of the things I didn't get a chance to mention to Cameron there was that Nathan Jones' team's also notorious for starting slow, so I really could see this being a bit of a sludgy, sort of slow, really sort of quite crap to watch game of football. If it ends 0-0, it wouldn't shock me. If it ends 1-0, I think Nathan Jones would take that. I think we'd all would take that right now. I think that you look back at that game against Leyton Orient maybe or Wigan early in the season last year, and you realise just how important those wins were, even if at the time it was, God, this wasn't exciting. I don't think we're playing long ball. I don't think we played that much long ball during pre-season. I think we are going to try and play it on the floor. But I look at Watford and I look at that squad and I go, this is a team that if we want to be looking at, the heady heights of 15th in the Championship, a long way away from the bottom three. And I think you're probably going to need to end up about 15th to be safely safe from relegation. But this is the sort of team at home that you have to be. This is, you're going into a ground that's going to be almost full. It's going to be loud. There's going to be lots of flags and different things. I'm sure the club are going to do some sort of exciting pre-match stuff. This is the sort of game that you have to win. At the very least, don't lose it. But our home form is going to dictate so much, and that's why games like this, I think, are going to be quite stressful. It's not so much that it's Watford. It's not so much I think Watford have a great side. I don't think they have a great squad. And they have some really great players. I think that, but I don't think the squad, looking at it, is remarkable unless these young players really come through. So really, you kind of have to step onto them, press them, push them, right? Really get high, get into them. Right, you can't sit back and play 11 men behind the ball against a team like this because, quite frankly, most teams in the Championship have the technical quality to beat you. Probably minus Sheffield Wednesday at this point. Everybody else can beat you if you're just going to put a low block in front of it. Right, what you've got to do is and when you go away from home, you're going to have to play the low block. But when you're at home, you're going to have to be a little bit expansive. And my only worry with Charlton's business, I don't know how expansive we made. I still think Nibs massively helps. But I still think that we miss someone who can play those really dangerous balls in the 10 role, or sort of. I think Nibs is really great at crashing the box, but he's not a great creator, sort of in terms of defense splitting passes. And he's definitely even at times when he has done that in League One, he's not proven in the Championship at that particular skill. And that's probably where I'm a little bit concerned, is with a striker in Callum who will put chances away. But if you don't create for him, he's not going to create too much for himself. Just before we go, we've been on for about 42 minutes. I know it's a work night. I've got work tomorrow. But I just wanted to take just a couple of moments just to reflect on some of the losses from this week. Obviously, we lost a player who really epitomised that idea of don't fall in love with a lone player, which was Jorge Costa, who we almost signed. If a certain Jose Mourinho hadn't sort of squashed the deal, or we'd sort of paid on the payment terms a bit earlier. But a wonderful centre-back, a centre-back that when you go back and watch games, he didn't even have to sprint to win the ball at times. It's quite impressive. He seemed like a really, really great guy off the pitch as well. Players seem to really, really get on with him. The fact that Alan Curbishley put the pitch he did, and if you haven't seen the Jose Mourinho interview where he's almost in tears, it's a really heartbreaking story. 53 is no age, and to have 2 pods in a week where I'm sat here and going, there's no age for someone to pass. It's been a really difficult time. So I think that if you take one thing from this, other than some knowledge about Watford from someone who really knows what they're talking about, that's not me. I think if we could being in our seats a little bit early on Saturday, I think it's really important to sort of say goodbye to 3 really, really important parts of Charlton history. Obviously, youngster Pierre Bojani, Ethan Odewale, who passed away last week, and Jorge Costa, who passed away yesterday at no age, at 53. But with that, I'm going to bring this to a close. For those of you that want the audio version, it'll be available probably either tonight or tomorrow. But thank you so much for tuning in to From the Valley Floyd. Back on Sunday, I'll put a tweet out probably around lunchtime. There is no Super Sunday this week, so it's pretty easy. But we'll see. I may push it back to Monday depending on what I'm doing. All right. All the best, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Up the Alex for Saturday. Watch Charlton live tomorrow. Listen to Richard Cawley's podcast. They're great. And I'll see you all later in the week. Bye.